Demonstrating the installation of a water bottle cage on a bicycle frame with the use of Riv-Nuts. Now I've got one cage on the down tube, but I want one on the seat tube as well. There's nothing there to mount it with. So a couple of considerations that we need to make before we decide where we're going to mount it. Number one, you have to be sure that it's not going to interfere with anything like derailleurs, cranksets, whatever. So all your components should be on the bike and in place. Also, you should have the bottle in the other cage just to make sure that, you know, if you didn't have the bottle there and you put that like that, you'd wind up with interference between the two. And then finally, the next consideration is aesthetics. You know, if it looks too unbalanced, it's not going to look good. And then also you need to make sure that there's going to be room to get your bottle in and out of there. Okay, so we've pretty well settled on our location. Now the equipment that we're going to use for this, number one, I'm using a Stein drilling jig. Now the reason I like to use a jig is that when it's secured to the frame, it guides the drill and you can be sure that there'll be no wandering around. I mean, center punching and drilling is pretty iffy on a round tube. It doesn't matter how careful you are, you can still get drill wandering, and it's just not a good idea. These can be you know, pretty easily made with an angle iron if you have a drill press. And also be using an angle drill, a pneumatic angle drill. The reason for that is that a conventional drill, like so, just won't fit where you need it to go. And finally, to install the Riv-Nuts, we'll be using a Riv-Nut installation tool, which is very similar to a pop riveter, but rather than a rivet, we're putting in basically what amounts to a threaded rivet, like so. Okay, I've secured the jig on the frame using a hose clamp and put a rubber strip, just an old inner tube around it to keep from marring the finish. We'll just double check our placement, make sure that we're not going to get any interference. Line that up with the holes on the jig. We've got lots of clearance between the bottles, and lots of room to get the bottle out. I'll take this one out of the way. Now just a final check to make sure that we've got the jig mounted straight. It's easier to do that with the drill in place. It'll help you to eyeball it along the frame. And you'll be able to see that it's whether or not it's square. It looks good. So we'll tighten down the clamp and then go ahead and drill the holes. Check again to make sure we haven't lost our square. That's good. Okay, the holes are drilled. Take a deburring tool and make sure that we don't have any burrs either on the inside or the outside of the hole. Nice and round and smooth. Look good, feel good. And we'll do a test fitting with the Riv-Nuts. That's good. Really nice and snug. Now I like to use some sort of an epoxy. JB Weld works well. Just give it a light coating on here so that it will be cemented into place as well as squeezed into place, and seals against moisture and also prevents against you know, loosening at some future date. I also like to use the rib side type Riv-Nuts. That also helps to secure it in there a little bit better. I've mixed up a little batch of JB Weld and spread a little bit of it on the Riv-Nut. So insert it in the hole. should have had right handy here. Clean off the excess. Okay, there we go. We got a nice, neat Riv-Nut installation. Ready to mount up our bottle gauge. Bada boom, bada bing. Alright, now another method for installing Riv-Nut without the tool is by using a hollow axle quick release style hub and a quick release skewer, and essentially you're using the cam and the skewer to pull on the Riv-Nut and to expand it inside the tube and lock it into place. Now, before we put the skewer through the axle, we need to put a nut on there so that there's something for the skewer face to push against. Put the quick release through and the skewer through, and make sure that you've got threads right up to the axle end, okay? Because you need to be able to thread the Riv-Nut right up tight to the axle. And ideally you want to have threads engaged all the way through, otherwise you could wind up pulling the threads out of the Riv-Nut. Now you're going to want to take this in small bites. If you try and take it all in too much in one bite, it's just not going to work. So put the Riv-Nut in the hole and set it so that you can actually push down on the lever depending on the position of the bike in the bike frame. You want to be able to get the most power you can on there. If you tighten it down so you're starting here and pulling up, you're going to have to be Mighty Mouse to be able to do that for sure. So we'll take small bites and then loosen it off, tighten it down another quarter turn or so, and just keep taking bites like that until we've got it locked into place. You'll be able to feel when it's starting to get snug, and you want to be able to, or you want to be sure that you keep it right, the face right tight in against the tube, so you don't get a bulge forming outside the hole. That wouldn't be good. When it gets down to the last strokes there, it takes quite a bit of power to close it down. So you might want to protect your hand with a rag or something on the lever, because it pushes in there pretty hard. But you definitely want to get it tight. And just take a look at it in the tightened position. When you think you've got there, just make sure that there's no visible play. And I think we're there. Okay, so that's installation using a hub and a quick release. Okay, for the next alternative method, what we've done is with a M5x1 bolt, because that's the size of the Riv-Nuts we're using, I've screwed a nut all the way up to the head of the bolt, and we put a couple of washers and greased the washers so that they can rotate freely. and then screw the riv nut on. Again, we want to have all the threads engaged ideally, so that we're pulling on all the threads and we don't risk pulling them out. Then we set that in the hole, and now what we're going to do is hold the head of the bolt and turn the nut, and turning the nut down will pull the bottom of the nut up and flare it out on the underside, on the inside of the tube, locking it in place. This method actually is easier, and I think works better than the quick release method. It's the method that I would recommend if you don't have the tool. As to when to stop, you're going to feel it. Once it gets really tight, you're there. And again, we have a rib nut installation. As I said, of the two methods, I prefer that one.